Employees of the World Central Kitchen non-governmental organization, including foreigners, were killed in an Israeli air bombing on the Gaza Strip. According to Gaza officials, those killed in the incident in Deir al-Balah, that is in central Gaza, include citizens of Poland, Australia and Britain, and also one Palestinian. Now, the Israeli military has said that it was in fact conducting a very thorough review at the highest levels to understand the circumstances of what it has described as a tragic incident. The Israeli military has said that the IDF makes extensive efforts to enable the safe delivery of aid and has been working pretty closely with the World Central Kitchen in their vital efforts. Now, the Australian Prime Minister has confirmed the death of the aid worker Lalzame Zomi Francoum. Anthony Albanese has said that his government has now contacted the State of Israel to demand those responsible to be held accountable for carrying out this bombing on what is essentially a community kitchen. The World Central Kitchen organization stated that it is now suspending its work in the Gaza Strip.
We certainly have already contacted the Israeli government directly. We are contacting the Israeli ambassador to ask for accountability here. The truth is that this is beyond any reasonable circumstances. Someone going about providing aid and humanitarian assistance should lose their life. And there were 4 aid workers as well as a Palestinian driver in this vehicle. This is a human tragedy that should never have occurred, that is completely unacceptable.
The Israeli officials have agreed to take Washington's concerns about a planned offensive in Rafah into account. A joint statement was issued after a virtual meeting with the U.S. officials on alternative ways to root out the Hamas fighters in the Gaza Strip. The 2.5-hour-long meeting led by the top U.S. and Israeli officials concluded with a plan for follow-up talks in person as early as next week. And there was no immediate sign that the United States and the Israeli negotiators had reached any agreement on the path forward in Rafah. Now, France has proposed a draft United Nations Security Council resolution that seeks options for possible UN monitoring of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The draft resolution includes proposals to help the Palestinian Authority to assume responsibility.
This draft resolution deals with the most pressing matters. It calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza without a time limitation. It also demands the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. It condemns the terrorist attacks by Hamas that took place on October 7, and it demands an immediate and full humanitarian access.
Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also visited Jordan and met with King Abdullah. They discussed the negotiations to secure an immediate ceasefire in the war, now in its 6th month, and also the release of hostages that have been taken into custody by Hamas. The White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan plans to travel to Saudi Arabia again this week for talks with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The United States is pushing for some kind of progress towards normalizing of relations with the State of Israel and Saudi Arabia. The talks of normalization, remember, had been put in cold storage in the aftermath of the horrific violence that has been unleashed on the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip since the 7th of October. However, conversations have resumed in recent months. A U.S. official said that Jake Sullivan planned talks with the Crown Prince to check in on this issue, but does not expect a major breakthrough. And also, we earlier spoke with our correspondent, Jody Cohen, where she talks about this Israeli airstrike that killed foreign aid workers in the Gaza Strip. Listen to what she has to say.
Yes, so Hamas has said that the Israel Defense Forces have struck in central Gaza and killed several foreign aid workers. Now, the workers were with the World Central Kitchen, and the aid organisation has called it a tragedy and said that aid workers should never be a target. Now, the World Central Kitchen have paused their Gaza operations and said they will make a decision about the future of their work in the region soon. Now, the IDF have said that they're investigating at the highest levels this tragic incident and said that Israel is making great efforts to enable the safe delivery of humanitarian aid and has worked closely with the World Central Kitchen in its efforts to provide food and aid to the residents of Gaza. But the IDF did not say if it was responsible for the strike, and we know that the World Central Kitchen had been coordinating their movements with the IDF, and the US has also called for a swift probe to determine how the aid workers were killed.
And also, WIOM's correspondent Jody Cohen discussed an expected possible breakthrough in talks between Washington and Tel Aviv about the next stage of war in the Gaza Strip. Listen in to what she has to say.
The White House has said that Israel has agreed to take its concerns about the Rafah operation into account. We know the US and Israel have agreed on the shared objective, which would be to see Hamas defeated in Rafah, but it's not clear if they've reached agreement on how to achieve that. Now, according to reports, the Israeli plan would be to evacuate civilians to central Gaza through protected routes to provide shelter, food and aids there, and then to carry out a ground operation to target Hamas in Rafah. And the operation could also help to get information on the 134 Israeli hostages, some of whom are thought to be held with Hamas leaders in southern Gaza. Now, the Biden administration's plan is reportedly to secure the Egyptian-Gaza border to prevent future arms smuggling to Hamas, to isolate Rafah, and for Israel to carry out targeted operations against Hamas, similar to Israeli raids against the terror groups in the West Bank. Now, there's expected to be a follow-up face-to-face meeting that's likely to happen in Washington between the US and Israel next week, and no doubt the discussions will continue then on the Rafah operation.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.